All right, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today for the webinar, Build, Deploy, and Manage Applications in the Cloud with Windows Azure. My name is Laura Albini, and I'll be your moderator. If you're having any issues with audio or seeing the presentation, please request assistance through the chat panel. All lines will remain muted until we get to the Q&A portion. If you're having difficulty seeing the slides, you can use the full screen feature in the bottom right corner or the top right corner if you're using Link 2013. You may submit questions at any point during the webinar, and we will address them during the Q&A. Today's slides and webinar recording will be sent to all attendees tomorrow. Make sure to stay until the end of the webinar for your chance to win a Microsoft Surface RT. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Today our speakers are Chris Saltz, Intellinet's Vice President of Client Solutions, and Martin Pichardo, Microsoft's Technology Solution Specialist for Windows Azure. So now I'm going to turn the webinar over to Chris.
Thank you, Laura, and welcome everyone. I'd like to kick things off with a little bit about Intellinet for the benefit of those of you who may not be familiar with us. We're a management consulting and Microsoft-centric technology services firm. A lot of firms take a technology-first approach. However, at Intellinet, our solutions always begin with an eye on strategy. We take into consideration change management, training, operational excellence, and overall organizational readiness, each of these being key factors above and beyond simply the implementation of technology. This approach has contributed to our longevity and growth as a firm, and this year we're proud to celebrate our 20th year in business. A few other key points about us. Our consultants have an average of better than 16 years of experience, and we have a number of Microsoft MVPs and virtual technical specialists among our consulting leadership ranks as well. We've served over 900 clients throughout the U.S. and abroad and worked with Microsoft Online Services since its very inception. In 2012, we were selected as a finalist by Microsoft for a staggering 7 worldwide, regional, and district partner awards, and were recognized as Microsoft's Southeast Partner of the Year and honored with the Southeast Customer Satisfaction Excellence Award as well, which we're very proud of and grateful to Microsoft and all of our customers for the opportunities to partner together in this wonderful recognition they've given us for their work. As many of you may know, today's webinar is the final installment in our 3-part cloud webinar series. In case you missed any of these preceding today's session, all of our recordings are available on demand at www.intellinet.com/cloud. Our first webinar covered how to thrive with Office 365. Then we showed you in our second webinar installment how to simplify device and PC management with Windows Intune. In today's session, we'll cover building, deploying, and managing applications in the cloud with Windows Azure. At this point, I'd like to introduce our key partner and friend, Martin Pichardo, who's a Microsoft Technical Solutions Specialist covering Windows Azure. Martin's going to explain and demonstrate Windows Azure in the context of a few customer usage scenarios, and then we'll let you know how you can get started with Windows Azure in your organization, and then wrap up with Q&A. Martin, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chris and Laura. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to join this webinar. Intellinet is one of our key partners with extensive experience with Azure, and as you saw in the previous slide, in cloud in general around our Office 365 as well as our Windows Azure platform. So before we get started, we really want to kind of go over what the Windows Azure platform is about. Laura, can you see the screen as I advance my slides? Make sure everybody's on the same page.
Yeah, yes.
Okay, good. So one of the things we like to do is take a step back and clarify what the cloud means. Cloud tends to be a very overloaded term. So one of the things we do is we use the National Institutes of Standards and Technologies, their deployment models. The good news is the industry in general has coalesced around these 4 pillars, different types of deployments. What you see here on the slide, on the left-hand side, you have traditional on-premises, or what's now being termed private cloud, in which you own all of the assets that are represented in each of these rectangles. So you're responsible for managing the networking, the storage, the servers, all the way up to the data and the applications. Over the last several years, as virtualization has taken off, We see more and more customers starting to virtualize first the majority of their workloads. That has led to a proliferation of virtual machines. As a result, one of the new deployment models that you've seen customers adopt is this ability to take your virtual machines and run them in somebody else's data center. This deployment model is typically coined infrastructure as a service, in which the virtualization stack, the servers, storage, and networking is managed by your server, and then from the OS and above, you're still responsible for. So depending on the managed provider, you may or may not be responsible for patching and managing the VMs, but you're certainly responsible for the care and feeding in terms of all the applications that are installed in each of those VMs. As we move further to the right, this is the new model. When Azure first came out 3 years ago, we first came out, one of the first companies to come out with a platform as a service offering. And the idea behind this deployment model is that we can raise the level of abstraction so that you as a customer are only concerned about your applications and your data, and the underlying runtime, the OS, and the virtualization stack is managed by the vendor. You no longer have to worry about patching the environment. That's taken care of for you automatically. The environment provides high availability, financially backed. You have the concept of rolling upgrades without taking any downtime. The idea here is you care less about the infrastructure and be more concerned about your application and your data, and leave everything else to your vendor. And then software as a service, most of us are familiar with this deployment model, in which you really just want to consume a service provided by a vendor, whether it's Salesforce or Office 365. You really aren't concerned about what the infrastructure is built on, what the vendor is responsible for the care and feeding of the entire environment. You just basically want to have access to the solution when needed. A different way of looking at this is, let's take a perspective from the different vendors that are in this space. If you look at the traditional on-premises, VMware has a very strong virtualization stack for on-premises, and with a recently released System Center 2012, we now effectively compete with System Center, with our System Center suite of tools against VMware. If we look at infrastructure as a service, the traditional vendors in this space, including Rackspace, GoGrid, and Amazon, as well as VMware, their strategy is to sell their software to their partners who in turn own and manage their data centers. It's really kind of the old things in a new way. You're kind of hosting these VMs in somebody else's environment. In platform as a service, this is where we believe that all the future leads to platform as a service. We strongly believe that the next generation of applications that are going to be built are going to be targeting platform as a service. Now this is a journey, and over time we'll see more and more commercial software vendors re-architect or migrate their solutions to the platform as a service offering. In this space, you have like Google App Engine and Force, and then Azure has been in production now for almost 3 years with a platform as a service. And then in software as a service, the build versus buy scenario, we have Office 365, our Dynamic CRM, as well as Salesforce come to mind. Now, one of the things that's going to differentiate Microsoft from all of these vendors, is that our strategy is really to give you flexibility and choice when it comes to deployment. You can use System Center 2012 to manage your on-premises environment, but you can also use System Center 2012 to manage your infrastructure as a service and your solutions that are running on Azure. So one set of tools for managing both on-prem as well as your public cloud. Azure, in turn, is an enabler across all these pillars. Whether it's infrastructure as a service, we fully support infrastructure as a service for Windows 2008 R2 as well as Windows Server 2012 VMs. We support Linux VMs as well, SQL Server 2008 and above, SharePoint 2010 and above, BizTalk Server, as well as Linux are all supported workloads. Our strategy is that for most of our server products will be officially certified to be run on the Windows Azure platform. As we move further to the right in platform as a service, we have significant momentum with customer adoption. Just yesterday we announced that Azure, we're adding approximately 1,000 new customers per day are being onboarded to the Windows Azure platform. So significant market momentum as we see more customers leveraging our platform as a service offering. And then in software as a service we see Azure as an enabler for allowing commercial software vendors as well as customers to build their SaaS offerings on top of Azure. So companies like Sage, MYOB, even our Microsoft Dynamics products and some of our Office 365 services are actually services that are built on top of the Windows Azure platform. So when you take a step back, we really want to enable you to have choices when it comes to deploying your new solution. So for example, whether it's SQL Server or SharePoint, if you want to deploy that on premises, you can do that. If you want to deploy SQL Server or SharePoint or BizTalk on a VM and deploy that VM on Azure, you can do that as well. If you prefer to consume SharePoint as a service, we have that as in SharePoint Online through our Office 365 service. If you want to consume SQL Server as a service, we have that as well on Windows Azure SQL databases. So you have the flexibility of choice when it comes to deploying your solution. We're not going to pigeonhole you into one of these pillars. We're basically going to give you the full set of capabilities to allow you to do what's best for your particular scenario. Now, the Windows Azure platform has a global presence. We have 4 major data regions in the U.S., 2 regions in Europe, as well as 2 regions in Asia. We just announced yesterday expansion into Australia. We're bringing in new data regions into Australia. And today we announced a public preview shortly of our deployment into mainland China. So significant expansion plans are in place for our Windows Azure platform. Now, we don't typically, when we look at deploying capacity to our data centers, we're fairly uniquely positioned in this space. Our deployment capacity is basically at the container level. We actually deploy containers. This is a picture of inside of one of those containers that has roughly about between 2,000 and 2,200 servers. I'll play this video. Actually, this is like link. Inside of these containers, these are all fully managed. When we deploy new capacity in our data centers, we actually deploy one of these containers. We just connect internet, power, and electricity, and then we automatically start provisioning all the servers that are in these containers. These are our Generation 3 data centers. We've already moved on to our new streamlined Generation 4, as well as the next generation of data center designs that are being built for the new data centers that we're bringing to market. When we look at Windows Azure by the numbers, it's a massive infrastructure from a physical facilities perspective. We've invested multi-billion dollars in our global data center footprint. We have over 200 services running in our platform, and that involves services like Hotmail, Bing, Office 365, Skype, Outlook, Azure, a plethora of other fairly large-scale services that are managed and operated in our data centers. We provide, specifically for Azure, we provide financially backed availability SLAs of 99.9. We are continuing to increase our data center footprint by adding new regions. And these numbers, as of June of last year, we had more server compute power running on Azure than the entire planet used in 1999. So it's a massive undertaking from a Microsoft perspective. Now, security is also equally important. We are very proud of being very, very transparent in terms of our security, privacy, and compliance programs. We've published a Windows Azure Trust Center, and you can see here the latest updates, whether it's ISO 27001, SSAE 16, EU model clauses, HIPAA BAA. All the latest updates are available for customers to see. And then under NDA, we will actually provide customers access to our audit reports. So we believe in transparency when it comes to security. FISMA and others are also other certifications that are very important to us that we're also working on as we speak. Now, on top of this global infrastructure, we build a Windows Azure set of services. Broadly speaking, these fall under three buckets. We have compute services, ranging from spinning up virtual machines to websites, to multi-tenant, multi-tiered cloud applications, as well as being able to spin up mobile backends. From a data services perspective, we have relational database services through our SQL database service. We have Hadoop for big data as a service, the ability to very quickly provision up to a 32-node Hadoop cluster on Azure in literally minutes. Our NoSQL tables, as well as blob storage for storing images and blobs, etc. And then from a networking perspective, we have a variety of networking capabilities ranging from virtual private networks that allows you to use your existing routers, whether it's Juniper or Cisco with others coming, to set up a secure site-to-site VPN tunnel between your on-premises data center and Windows Azure. And we just also recently released the ability for you to be able to, from within a Windows box server, through software, through the RAS capabilities that are built into Windows, be able to set up a point-to-site connectivity between your desktop or server and Windows Azure. And then to round up our networking capabilities, we have Traffic Manager. Think of it like a global DNS that allows you to load balance your websites that are deployed on Azure across different Windows Azure data centers. So this is one way to scale out your solutions and be able to withstand any outages that Microsoft might experience in one of our data centers by basically distributing your solution across as many data centers as required by your solution. On top of this basic infrastructure, there's a series of services that are targeted at developers. So caching service provided as a service. Identity, our Windows Azure Active Directory, is the same directory service that Office 365 uses. So we provide a multi-tenant directory service on Azure that's being leveraged by Office 365, and it's now open for customers to leverage themselves as they build their solutions on Azure. Service Bus for integration, and then one of the areas where we're making significant investments is around streaming. So the Summer Olympics, London Summer Olympics, outside of the US, were streamed live through our media services service. Today we have video on demand streaming, and soon we'll have live streaming capabilities through our Windows Azure Media Services. We recently announced strategic partnership with NBC Sports for streaming very high-profile sporting events through our Azure platform. We have content delivery network, high-performance compute, as well as integration and analytics services as well. Now, one of the key takeaways from this meeting is that hopefully you don't think of Windows Azure as just a .NET platform. We're really making investments across a whole plethora of languages, ranging from Java, PHP, Node.js, Python, and Ruby, and we'll continue to expand our support for multiple languages. As it relates to .NET and Java, we ship toolings for both Visual Studio as well as for Eclipse, including the native .NET libraries and Java client libraries. And then for PHP, Node.js, and Python, we ship the native SDKs and the native language libraries for each of those languages. As it relates to Java, PHP, Node.js, and Python, you can develop not only on Windows, but also on a Mac and Linux environment and deploy your solutions from those environments onto the Windows Azure platform. As we delve a little bit more into some of the specific workloads that we see customers adopting, one of those is the ability of spinning up virtual machines on Windows Azure through our infrastructure as a service offering. Multiple ways of getting started. You can spin up these VMs through the management portal. You can script the provision of these VMs through PowerShell, as well as through our general scripting libraries that are available on Windows, Linux, and Mac. And these PowerShell scripts and libraries basically leverage our REST-based APIs for provisioning the virtual machines. We ship a variety of images available in the portal for you to choose from. So whether it's Windows Server 2008 R2, Windows Server 2012, Linux, we support CentOS, OpenSUSE, and Ubuntu. And then these are persistent stateful VMs These VMs are persisted in our cloud storage service, which is maintained, in which we maintain 3 copies to make sure that your VMs are not lost, and then geo-replicated to other other data centers in the U.S. So let's walk through a couple of use case demos. I'll share my desktop and we'll get started. Okay, Laura, can you verify if you can see my screen?
It's loading for me right now.
Okay, let me give it a little bit. Let me know when you can see it.
Yep, can see it now. Thanks.
Okay, if anybody's having issues, just I am, and we'll make sure I'll proceed somewhat slow so the screen can refresh in time. What you see here is our Windows Azure Management Portal. This is an HTML5 based portal. It can be accessed from any device, any tablet, any browser. It's enhanced for touch. This portal is basically leveraging underneath the covers our REST-based APIs that you can also leverage as well. So most of the things that you can see me doing through this portal, you can also do through scripts as well. I'm going to start off with websites. So one of the common requests that we see from customers, IT organization getting from the business is, let's look at marketing, for example. Marketing has this need to very quickly set up, for example, a WordPress site. What if you can very quickly enable your business units to spin up a WordPress site or a CMS site, or for that matter, any public-facing website in under 60 seconds? So this ability to give your business greater agility in deploying these types of use cases. We have the capability of provisioning websites, either a quick create, or I'll go through the gallery. We're working with the open source community as well as third-party software vendors that are publishing their solutions in our application gallery. So for example, here you'll see .NET, Nuke, Drupal, Composite, Django, Drupal, Joomla, Kentico, and the list just continues to grow. WordPress. If I wanted to for example, set up a WordPress site, it's just a matter of choosing it from the menu option, choosing WordPress, clicking next, giving it a name. We support MySQL as well. Choosing the region, let's say I'm going to choose the East US region. I'm going to use my subscription, my MSDN subscription. Agree to the terms and conditions. And then what we'll do is we'll, in under 60 seconds, provision and deploy a WordPress site that's hosted in our website service. Once it's deployed, we can basically go in there and finish configuring and installing WordPress. All in under a minute is usually the amount of time that it takes to provision the environment. Let me give it a couple of more seconds and then we'll walk through the rest of the process. You see here on the left-hand side is the menu for the different set of services that are available today on Azure, ranging from websites, virtual machines, mobile services, our cloud services for platform as a service, whether you want to provision a SQL Azure database, etc., and storage accounts. Here you'll see that the site has now been provisioned. If I drilled into it, we can monitor the website from the dashboard. You'll see we have series of perf counters and counters that you can track on the website, usage, how much memory is being used, etc. And here you'll see that we have integration with FTP, FTPS. You can deploy from a variety of different means to our Azure websites capabilities. So let me click on the site URL. And this is our WordPress site that is running on Azure. I'm just going to finish up going through the rest of the typical installations. WordPress. User ID and password. And finish the normal WordPress installation. One of the key things is you will never have seen me set up, run up setup.exe or provision a VM or any of that, anything related to the infrastructure. I just literally walk through a menu, WordPress got deployed, and now as I log in, you'll see that we have WordPress now up and running with the corresponding MySQL database already provisioned. You don't have to worry about patching the environment. You don't have to worry about provisioning VMs. It all, under 2 minutes, we were able to provision this service. The key theme here is drive velocity and agility, so that you can very quickly ramp up new use cases on Azure. Now, it turns out one of the interesting capabilities that websites provide you is this ability to scale. So your developers might start off with the free tier. Let's just spin up a website and start playing with that environment and testing it, etc. But as that site now is starting to be consumed by customers or your internal users, you might want to scale that application. So you have the ability to go from the free tier to a shared tier, all the way up to reserve, in which you can say, you know, I think I need 5 large VMs because the traffic warrants that amount of infrastructure. What we'll do is we'll automatically provision those VMs, deploy WordPress across those VMs, and under 5 minutes you'll have a new environment set up for WordPress. In this particular case, it'd be 5 large VMs, all without ever having to set up exe or provision a VM yourself manually. It's just done, provided for you automatically. Now, as the level of sophistication grows and you need to do a multi-tier application, then from websites you can graduate to platform as a service, where I'm going to build a multi-tier cloud service app, then using Visual Studio. So if you open up Visual Studio and install the Windows Azure SDK on your machines, then within Visual Studio you can very quickly start provisioning your Windows Azure multi-tenant cloud service. What you'll see here on my box is Visual Studio 2012. We also support Visual Studio 2010. I have the Windows Azure SDK that I installed on my machine. And what that does is that extends Visual Studio by adding new templates for Windows Azure. So now I can basically go and do new project, choose the cloud, choose an Azure cloud service. Let's say I want to do MVC4 site. That site might have a application tier. I'll add that as well. Click OK. And then what Visual Studio will do is it'll provision a template. Let's just go with an empty internet application. Use Razor for MVC. It'll provision the necessary boilerplate template for your MVC app, as well as for that middle tier worker role. And then it'll contain a Windows Azure project that will serve as a unit of deployment for the cloud services. So again, as the level of sophistication and requirements grows, you can graduate from websites over to cloud services. And then here you can see I have things that are specific to Azure around the size, the number of instances, the number of VMs that are required. And then in order to publish this, it's as simple as clicking right-click, publish, choose my Azure account, click next, walk through the rest of the wizard, and then basically deploy my solution on Azure. Now it turns out that you might have a requirement to have much more control over the environment. You want to install some third-party software. You want to be able to log into the environment. You want to control when the environment gets patched. So you can graduate from websites to cloud services, then to virtual machines. In this environment, it's just from the menu option, new virtual machine. You can choose from a gallery. You see that we have a plethora of images from Windows Server 2012, 2008 R2. We also support SQL Server 2008 and 2012, as well as VisTalk Server 2013 by the hour. So if you want to provision a VM that's running SQL Server 2012 Standard Edition, You can provision that VM and just pay by the hour for both SQL as well as Azure, or you can bring your own SQL licenses if that's required. And then from a Linux perspective, you see we have a plethora of options as well, and we also published a website that has, it's called OpenTech website, that has customers where partners are building and uploading images, Linux images. You'll see things like my images. If I had my own images, I can deploy my own images up there as well. But for this example, let's say I want to walk through an exercise of spinning up a Windows Server 2012 machine. I click Next, give it a name, choose the size of the VM. I'm going to go with small. The name of the administrator, user ID and password. The DNS name that this machine is going to have, my storage account. In this case, you see that I have a virtual network that I've set up at home. I have an MSP Home Office VPN. I have a Cisco ASA 5505. And the subnet to which I'm going to deploy this, I've created a couple of subnets in my VPN, in my virtual private network inside of Azure. Click Next. And if I want to deploy multiple VMs that are going to be load balanced, so my web tier could have multiple, 3, 4, 5 VMs. I can make it as part of an availability set. That way, I'm assured that those VMs are deployed across different racks in the environment, thereby eliminating a single point of failure and avoid deploying all of your solution to a single rack. In case that rack would fail, then your entire solution will go down. Availability set basically tells us to deploy those VMs across different racks in different regions within the data center. In this case, I'm just going to leave it at blank, click check, and then in about 5 minutes, I'll have a VM provision on Windows Azure that I can remote desktop into and then install my software. As we go through the rest of the list, you see here HD Insight, which is our Hadoop offering. You can go in here, do a quick create, for example. Now, data services, HD Insight. The cluster size, I can have up to 32 nodes. Give it a name, user ID and password, and when I click Next, we'll basically provision a Hadoop cluster for you in under approximately 5 minutes. We've also introduced very recently our Windows Azure backup service. So this allows you to basically configure your, create a vault on Windows Azure that has a backup, a vault backup. And then from Windows Server 2008 R2 and Windows Server 2012, you can install an agent on that VM, and then using the built-in capability backup service inside of Windows, schedule that VM to do file-level backups directly to Windows Azure in our recovery service. And you can do also item-level restore as well. With our System Center 2012 SP1, DPM, our Data Protection Manager, also supports backing up directly to the cloud by integrating with our recovery services service on Azure. To round it up, networking, you'll see here that I have my MSP home office that's configured. I've provisioned on the right-hand side, this is my home network that's a Cisco ASA 5505 appliance. And then on the left-hand side is the actual virtual gateway that we provide for you when you provision the virtual gateway connectivity. One of the things you'll see also is the ability to specify your DNS servers. If you want to do point to site, so if you want to allow your individual desktops to be able to VPN to your service, you can basically click this checkbox and set that up. Define your subnets, add address spaces. Again, connectivity for us is extremely important. So we support both the hardware-based VPN as well as software-based scenarios. Go back to the presentation. Okay, so Laura, can you see the presentation again?
I can.
Okay, so let's look at a couple of use case scenarios. One of the things we looked at very briefly at infrastructure as a service, so there's ability to provision VMs very rapidly. Another key workload that we're having significant momentum around is cloud integrated storage. So Microsoft finalized the acquisition back in November, a company called StoreSimple. And they provide a SAN device that you install on premises. If you look at what typical storage scenarios look like today, here in the bottom, you see most customers have primary storage, then they have an archival tier 2 storage. They probably do disk-to-disk backup to their secondary tier, and from there they do tape. They may or may not be doing SAN replication to another data center, and they take that tape off to an offsite for DR. The Windows StoreSimple device, the Azure StoreSimple device, integrates all those capabilities into one appliance. So it has cloud integrated storage, SAN device that you install on-prem. It has auto tiering built in, so it comes with a SSD tier as well as a SAS tier of hard drives, all RAID 10, and then automatically tiers to the cloud. The third tier is Windows Azure Storage. All the automatic tiering happens in the box. It supports thin provisioning of your LUNs, and from the device itself comes with built-in backup software. So all the data that resides on the device, you can do cloud snapshots and also do item-level recovery from the cloud as well. And you can use secondary. You can spin up multiple of these appliances across multiple data centers for DR scenarios. We typically see savings from 60 to 80% in terms of lower total cost of ownership relative to the average cost per terabyte per year. What customers see today, anywhere from $3,000 to $6,000, depending on the organization. With our Windows Azure StoreSimple solution, we typically come in around the sub $1,000 range on a fully loaded per terabyte cost per year. So significant cost savings around storage can be achieved with our StoreSimple offer. Another use case I mentioned about our Windows Azure backup service and the ability to basically use both install an agent on the Windows servers themselves to back themselves up directly. So I have several customers who are provisioning virtual machines on Azure, and they're basically just installing the agent on those machines on Azure so that they back themselves up in the cloud. No additional software required. The other scenario is to use Data Protection Manager from DPM. You see here in this diagram, DPM supports built-in integration with Exchange, SQL, SharePoint, Windows Server, etc. You can use DPM to do your backups for these environments, backup to disk. So in this case, DPM is backing up directly to the StoreSimple device here in the top-hand corner. And then the StoreSimple device is basically tiering to Azure. You could also configure DPM to use our Windows Azure backup service. So DPM will first back up to disk, and then from disk, using the Windows Azure backup service, automatically backups and archives to the cloud. And then DPM also supports tape as well as setting up DR scenarios for spinning up another DPM server offsite for replication. So we've covered infrastructure as a service, we've covered the StoreSimple appliance, as well as backup and data protection with our Windows Azure backup service, as well as DPM. The last use case scenario that I wanted to cover is a desktop protection. So we have a very aggressive campaign offer right now, promotion with eVault, which is a Seagate company, where you can install their agents on your desktops, on your mobile devices, and enable those devices to automatically back themselves up to the cloud. All the data is encrypted at rest. The service also provides remote data wipe, so as these tablets and laptops, if they get lost, you can basically from a central console enable remote data wipe. All the data is compressed and encrypted on the device, and then encrypted at rest on the Windows Azure platform. It works as the agent detects that your PC or that desktop has access to the internet connectivity, it will automatically start backing up. You can create through your admin central management console the policies of how often those devices need to back themselves up, and whether or not the end users themselves can restore their files. It's a very intuitive, simple UI that the end users can use to basically download and restore any files that they may have lost. Now, those are the use cases. I want to briefly discuss how you can get started consuming Azure, and then I'll hand it off to Chris and Laura, who will discuss some of the offerings that intellinet is providing as well. So one of the promotional offers that we have right now is this ability to spin up VMs, and this concept of being able to deploy up to 25 single core VMs, each VM with 150 gigabytes of storage, 30 million storage transactions, 30 gigabytes of bandwidth, in other words, a gigabyte of bandwidth per day. Spinning up 25 of those VMs, being able to back up to a terabyte per month, and a VPN gateway for $25,000. So 25 VMs for $25K per year. That includes the Windows Server licenses, the CALs, external connectors, which are very, very aggressive offer that we have right now through the middle of June. You can spin up, if you rather deploy larger VMs, for the same cost, you can spin up 12 medium VMs instead of 25. And you see the numbers here of what the configurations would look like for that initial investment. That's basically about a 25% discount of what the pay-as-you-go rates that we have published online. Additionally, you could also combine. So you might be able to you may want to spin up virtual machines, as well as leverage our Store Simple appliances. So with the current promotions that we have through June 14th, based on a Windows Azure monetary commitment of $50,000, we actually provide you the Store Simple appliances at no cost, yours to keep, and we pay for year one support of the appliance as well. So this sample configuration you see here, where I'm spinning up 25 medium VMs, as well as being able to back up to 10 terabytes of data through the Store Simple device on the Windows Azure platform. With that, Laura, I'll hand it over to you and Chris.
Great. Thanks, Martin. Awesome insight here. So where do we go from here? Intellinet offers several ways to help your organization get started with Windows Azure. So I'm going to quickly highlight 4 of our Jumpstart offerings for what we offer around Windows Azure, each being designed as a quick, 1-week, cost-effective engagement to provide your organization with a solid understanding of the benefits of both cost and simplicity, as well as recommendations on how to move forward best based on your needs and your current state as well. So the first of these Jumpstart offerings are Intellinet's virtualization assessment. So within this 1-week Jumpstart engagement, our experts come alongside you to assess your current physical and virtual environments and determine the feasibility for Azure-based virtual machines and virtual networks. We feel like this is a great and really logical starting point, particularly for organizations interested in first getting started with Windows Azure as an extension of the data center. Another great starting point Another great starting point for organizations interested in Windows Azure for cloud data storage services is our Cloud Storage and Database Assessment Jumpstart. So this is a 1-week Jumpstart, which is an evaluation of your current and future storage needs to identify areas of cost savings and efficiencies through Windows Azure. Also, for organizations that are interested in using Azure to develop applications, Intellinet's Application Development Assessment Jumpstart is an expert evaluation of your current and future business application needs, aligning those with recommendations for implementing architectures that can support Azure and on-premise application development and deployment. And then finally, if you're interested in building out a Windows Azure proof of concept centered around business application development, our Application Development Proof of Concept Jumpstart is a great next step. And within this Jumpstart engagement, our experts will configure a proof of concept that supports each on-premises development as well as an Windows Azure cloud-based demo environment as well. So to get started with Windows Azure or any of these Jumpstarts, You need only contact your business development director here at Intellinet or indicate your interest in the survey at the end of this webinar, and we'll have an Intellinet representative contact you. And as a bonus, those who sign up for a Jumpstart by June 13th will be entered into a second drawing for a second Microsoft Surface RT. Now with that, we're going to go ahead and open up the lines for questions and answers. Checking to see real quickly if we've gotten any along the way. So we did have a couple that came in during the webinar registration process.
All guests have been unmuted. You will now rejoin the meeting.
Okay, so we're all unmuted now. So a couple of them that came in that we can lift up for Martin or others. How is Azure being used within the public sector currently?
Right, so we do have, so in the public sector, we have a team that works closely with our public sector customers. We're working right now on our FISMA certification as well as FedRAMP. So it's an area that we're heavily investing in. We'll make additional announcements later this calendar year. But suffice to say that from a certification perspective, it is one area that we're making significant investments, and we're well on our way to achieving FISMA certification soon. There's active work going on as we speak.
Okay. So here's another one. Can we deploy SharePoint on top of Azure?
Absolutely. That's one of the key workloads that's been certified by both the SharePoint product group as well as Windows Azure. The ability for you to provision SharePoint farms on Azure is one of our top workloads that we see customers will be deploying on Azure. So the answer is yes, and we've also published prescriptive guidance over on our Windows Azure Azure.com site on how to deploy and architect a SharePoint farm on Azure. We've actually, I believe there's some samples that go through PowerShell scripts that basically allow you to provision and automate the provisioning of a SharePoint farm. Some of the MVPs in the community have published some blogs that go over some detail of how to automate the deployment of SharePoint. So as long as it's SharePoint 2010 and above, it's fully supported.
Okay.
Since we have unmuted the lines, if you can go ahead and mute your lines unless you have a question, that way we don't hear any background noise, that would be great.
Okay. Another question or line of questioning that's come through. What network connectivity is required in terms of VPN, P2P, hardware firewalls?
So to spin up a VPN, all you need is configure the router, your Cisco or Juniper router, and it's very, very straightforward. You can, it's on the Azure side. It's a 5-10 minute exercise to configure the environment. Once you've defined your VPN and your subnets on Azure, you can basically export a script. You choose from a drop-down which device you have on-prem. That generates a script that you can hand over to your network admins to run on your Cisco or Juniper device. So fairly straightforward.
Okay. And then Martin, we had a question come in from Jonathan. Are there any cost comparisons of the storage backup options available, and how do they stack up against other more traditional methods?
Yeah, so what we're finding, so the Store Simple device, there's multiple use cases for the Store Simple device. The first one being file shares. So if you have a very large set of documents and file servers in the environment, if you have a lot of archival as well, and then depending on the change rate, backup can be a key target for it as well. And the change rate is very important because if your daily change rate is terabytes per day, then obviously you need some massive pipes in order for the device to be able to upload those changes to the cloud. So there's some scenarios where it may not be feasible. But if you take a step back from a cost perspective, what we traditionally see, if you look at some of the studies by Gartner and some others, the fully managed cost per terabyte on premises today ranges anywhere from $2,200 all the way up to $4,000 or $5,000. I have customers that come in on the lower end of that. I've had customers that come in at the mid-tier, and I've had others that have come in at around the $4,500 to $5,000 range. When you look at the cost, fully loaded cost, we are very competitive. We come in under $1,000 per terabyte per year. So we can work closely with you and sit down and put together a TCO as well as an ROI based on your specific scenarios to see if it makes sense or if it's feasible to leverage our SourceSimple device.
Okay, we had another one that came in from Douglas. How would you manage and allocate the cost associated with a department spinning up web servers, etc.?
So there's several ways. One of the things we recently purchased a company called Metrics Hub, and Metrics Hubs allows you to very easily track the cost of your sites. It allows you to I'll bring it up in a second. It allows you to basically monitor the cost on a per service level inside of Azure. What you also have is when you sign an enterprise agreement with Microsoft for Azure, you get access to an EA portal. In the EA portal, you can basically spin up different accounts for, let's say, for each of your departments. And each of those departments assign one or more Azure subscriptions. And then you can roll up the billing and cost from your EA through the EA portal site. So that allows you to track your cost at the department level. The lowest level of granularity for us is the subscription. So what we see customers do is they'll go in there and the portal and create multiple accounts. And each account, let's say, is representative of a department. I have some customers that the accounts are at the application level because they want to track costs on a per project basis. So depending on how you want to track it, you create accounts in the portal, and then under those accounts, you basically provision your Azure subscriptions and delegate co-admins to those departments. You as an administrator can basically see roll up all the costs from our central billing portal. There are no caps today on that you can specify on a subscription. It's a feature that we've submitted that's been asked for before, and the PG is evaluating it. But at this time, there are no caps that you can specify from a dollar perspective. Each subscription can have caps around the number of VMs and services that can be provided. That you can control. But if it's a monetary cap, we can say, I want this subscription to only be able to spend up to $500 and this one to spend up to $250. We don't have that yet.
Okay. All right. Well, I think we are in need of wrapping up here. I definitely would like to close by thanking our speakers and each of our attendees for your time. We hope that this has been a valuable and informative session. We're more than happy to discuss any plans that you might have or interest in Windows Azure and how we can be of help to you in that process. Please make sure that you complete the event survey over the next hour for your chance to win a Microsoft Surface RT. Laura is placing the event survey link into our chat panel right now. As I mentioned earlier, those that sign up for any Windows Azure assessment or proof of concept jumpstart will be entered into a second drawing for a free Microsoft Surface RT as well. And lastly, if you've missed any of our webinars in this three-part cloud series, you can view them on demand at www.intellinet.com/cloud. Today's webinar has been recorded, and it'll be emailed to you and posted on our website this week in addition to our other previous segments. Thanks again, everybody, for attending, and have a great remainder of your day. Thank you.